Hi, this is the Bluegrass Blues podcast. I'm Amy.
And this is episode 8, and I'm Jesse. Well, there's a lot to get through this week. Some of it's entertainment, some of it's serious, but let's start with where you were the past week. You weren't here in Louisville, you were in another state.
I was in southwestern New York State at the Chautauqua Institution, which is a place that was started as like a Sunday school for Protestant ministers on Lake Chautauqua. And it's this beautiful community, and they have 9 themed weeks every summer on topical issues like energy and global warming and capital. This week was innovation in capitalism, how to meet 21st century challenges. So I saw Ken Burns there one year. I saw Krista Tippett there with On Being one year. I saw Sandra Day O'Connor there one year. Eugene Robinson, the gay Episcopal priest, who's amazing.
I think Louis Black was there this year.
Yeah. So really, talented, smart people come, and people come and stay in this like place that just looks like paradise. There is a map of. Well, actually, there's like grounds that were shaped in the shape of Palestine, so you can even like walk around the perimeter of Palestine. We'll talk about that later. But so I was there during Innovation in Capitalism Week, and honestly, this was not my favorite week. I've been there, close to 20 years, I think. I took my kids when they were little and keep coming back. But, they had, leading economic thinkers exploring the future of the global economy with a focus on, the American capitalist system. And, I don't know that I learned much new. Like, I learned that, our system is broken. There is great income inequality, businesses should be stepping up and looking out for their employees and for their customers, as well as for the bottom line every quarter for their shareholders. And companies are stupid if they just take the profits and give it to their shareholders rather than reinvesting it in their companies. So I don't know. It wasn't my favorite.
So were there business executives there talking about this, or did they discuss the idea of the oligarchy, or did they get into that at all, or was it pretty much just a look at business and how it should be doing better for employees?
Pretty much that.
Okay.
It wasn't as political as, the oligarchs are ruining this country and fascism is taking over and any of that stuff. But I will say, I'll tell you a highlight of the week. Everybody should know about this young woman. Her name is Ekep Nkweli, Nkwelle. She's a rising jazz vocalist, and she is incredibly, incredibly talented. She writes her own music, and she was there with a band of other 20-something-year-old persons of color. The pianist was amazing. Upright bass player was a young Latinx woman, and the drummer also a man of color. And they completely blew me away. So definitely look up Ekep Nkweli. She's been at Lincoln Center, Jazz at Lincoln Center, and she will be coming to your town, and you definitely want to go see her. The other thing I want to mention about Chautauqua is over the years, I've noticed how white it is. It's a gated community. People of, the Protestant people who bought houses like on the lake, 150, 140 years ago, 100 years ago, there's very little turnover of real estate. So it's very white. And I found out some things about blacks and Jews. What I found out was there was a woman who was advertising a rental at Chautauqua over the summer in the mid 50s, And she put an advertisement in the Chautauqua paper, and she basically said only Gentiles could rent from her. And apparently there was a big hullabaloo. But the bottom line is that Jews still don't own a lot of real estate at Chautauqua. I went to the Archives Center and talked to the director of archives about explicit racism and anti-Semitism, and nothing has been codified in deed, in the deeds or laws, but people just are not comfortable with blacks, Jews. You don't see a lot of Asians there, and what I was told by the director of archives is just, people just are uncomfortable. He was not condoning their behavior, but he was just telling it as it is. And the reason I mention this, Jesse, is that this is a place that, aspires to be this liberal haven, right? Like they get all these progressive thinkers, and everybody's got like an LGBTQIA flag out front and all the things, and yet there's still rampant racism, anti-Semitism, and just anti-immigrant. It's very white. What can I say?
But I would imagine that in the past there were covenants in any real estate agreements that said no blacks, no Jews, because that was pretty common back in the before the 60s into the 60s, where it just was a part of the contract when you bought or sold a house. That was one of the things that existed there. And the way you describe it, it honestly reminds me a lot of San Francisco, because these are supposed to be hugely liberal communities, but if you look at the racial makeup of these places, it's very white, very upper middle class, and there were efforts that they did in the past that led to the segregation. And now that they've got it ready, well, now that it's an issue, people are saying it's not about race, it's about preserving the community standards or whatever.
Yeah.
So there are these buzzwords that go around when these allegedly liberal areas are talking about, being progressive and doing all these things. And, it's like, I would imagine this in San Francisco would be the kinds of places that the Trump administration would be saying are, anti-American or whatever, the crap that they talk about. But in reality, they're more segregated than a lot of the places that you think are segregated are.
Well, you can't afford to live in San Francisco if you're not a rich white tech bro, right? And you can't afford to live in Chautauqua if you haven't been handed down a house, from your ancestors. It's impossible to break in.
So there's no ethnic diversity there, and I wonder, is Chautauqua, does it designate itself as a sanctuary city, or do you know?
It's a nonprofit.
Okay.
So, it's an educational institution. They do bring in lots of young musicians and dancers and creatives, and they are very multi-ethnic. The young people that go to train there in the summertime are very multi-ethnic, but don't try to buy a house there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all really interesting, and it just is kind of typical of what we are dealing with today in terms of discrimination, and it's almost like what's happening here in Louisville, where it used to be a sanctuary city, and if you go downtown, you see all these flags that are representing the sister cities of Louisville, Kentucky, and they're from all over the world. They're Latin America, they're from Africa, they're European cities. But, not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, the mayor announced that the city would not be a sanctuary city anymore because of what the Trump administration is threatening to do in terms of pulling funding from various programs here. And it's kind of a failure of. I compare this to when someone succumbs to the whims of evil, they become collaborators. And it's like Vichy France during World War II, and the Nazis had taken over France, and the Vichy government essentially was having letting the Nazis run the place, even though they were saying they really represented the French government, which they didn't represent. But maybe that's being a little extreme, but there's this idea that there are too many appeasers in this country right now. Like, CBS did it by giving up all the information for, paying the bribe off to Trump. But it's not only that. It's just the idea is, where are people of color or people of different ethnicities supposed to go to feel comfortable these days? Because there's this trend to just make everything, make America great again is make America white again. And like you were describing today, that there are people working who are doing jobs that other people don't want to do. Like you said that you were walking along the street today and you saw a bunch of workers up on a roof.
Yeah.
Just in 90-degree heat, and they weren't white. They were of a different ethnicity. But the sad thing is that if ICE drove around and decided to stop, they would take these guys from their jobs and just send them off to some horrible place. But it's not only an American problem, it's also an international problem, because there are things going on overseas in the Middle East that are really horrendous. And I think you are involved in a group that is talking about just not accepting this evil that's going on. And do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, October 7th, 2 years ago, happened, and of course, the murders of 1,200 Israelis was absolutely horrific, and Hamas is responsible, and Hamas, frankly, is partly responsible for the devastation and starvation and problems that ordinary Palestinian civilians are facing today. No doubt about it in my mind. However, Israel has, this is what I was concerned about. I knew that they would have an outsized response, and they have. And I helped form a group here called Jewish Louisvillians for Peace. And over the last couple of years, we've been having forums and panel discussions and sending money to Palestinian and Jewish Israeli groups that are trying to get the war to stop and to create a two-state solution and to ensure that Palestinians have sovereignty and dignity and good lives, as well as the Israelis, primarily Jews. So we just released a letter basically from Jews to our national Jewish leaders to basically say, you've got to start speaking up. It's way too late now, but the time is now to speak up. And of course, we have a shared history of oppression, expulsion, pogroms, ghettos, and genocide. And these leaders taught us to stand for never again. And now we're asking them to stand for exactly that, never again. And it's time. It's past time. And we have a really well-written, I think, letter that's going out. I hope it becomes viral. We'll put it into our blog post. If you're Jewish and you want this war to end immediately, and you want your clergy people and you want your heads of your Jewish federations and your Jewish institutions to put pressure on Netanyahu and his war machine, I really encourage you to sign the letter, and hopefully we'll get good press and we'll get influencers out there, and maybe we'll even affect public policy.
Well, what you're describing, the situation in Israel and in Gaza is horrendous right now, and it's this idea of taking an ethnic group, concentrating it to one area, and then letting horrible things happen to them. Which, there is a parallel here in the United States with the ICE roundups of various immigrants. taking people from their jobs, taking children from schools, taking people from their meetings to like actually get their citizenship, and just carting them off, and they put them down in this horrific. It's a concentration camp in South Florida. They call it alligator Alcatraz. I have a problem with that terminology because it's like they're selling merch with that on it, which is really horrendous. And they should be calling it alligator Auschwitz. And I know that's going to offend a lot of people, but let's look at the reality. Alcatraz was a prison in San Francisco. It's now a tourist attraction, but in the past, it was a prison where you would put the most dangerous people in the world. And it's out on an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay because it made it harder for them to escape. So, that's Alcatraz, a prison for evil, dangerous people. The people that are being put in this place in Florida aren't...
Concentration camp.
Yeah, it's a concentration camp in Florida. It's, it's children, and it's mothers and fathers and people who are working hard, who've been in this country for decades in some cases. And we're accepting that here in the sort of the same way that some Israelis are accepting the treatment of Gaza. So it's not, it's like there's a trend worldwide toward evil these days. And it's really troubling because no one's standing up against it. It's very few people are actually saying anything that's going to stop this atrocity. And I'm seeing certain things happen now, which, there are glimmers of hope. There was a story last week where a Japanese company is going to bring 200 tech-related jobs to Frankfurt. And my thought was, well, yeah, that's good. They're going to be high-paying jobs. They're in Frankfurt, and but it's a Japanese company, which means that you would think that some people from Japan would be coming with them to establish this place. And given that ICE is pulling people off the streets, and they're not looking for any indication of criminal activity, they're just racially profiling people, and they're carting them away without due process. So why would any company want to come here from another country if the result will be that their executives will be carted off and just thrown into this horrible concentration camp? So it's really hard to be encouraged. How do you attract jobs here when this is a state that needs jobs? It needs good paying jobs, but it just doesn't register that the country in general is not an appealing place for foreigners to come to. You look at the tourism industry, tourism is way off. Places like Las Vegas, which are just magnets for international tourism, it's having a hard time getting people there.
And I don't know if people know, but Kentucky has been very high in refugee resettlements. These are people that come legally to this country, many of whom have lived in refugee camps for a generation or two, terrible conditions, and legally have come here. And Louisville, Bowling Green, for example, are cities with a lot of refugees, and they have become the part of the fabric of these cities. Of course, we've mentioned the equestrian industry really relies on Latinx immigrants, and so Kentucky has a lot to lose, and we should really be fighting this treatment of our neighbors.
And this goes to the mayor as well, because the mayor should be saying we will not accept this. This is not humanity. This is not the kind of people we want to be. But he's just decided that no, this isn't going to be a sanctuary city anymore. So, in my opinion, if it's not going to be a sanctuary city, take down those flags from sister cities, because you're being hypocritical if you're saying that we connect with these other places around the world, but instead we're not going to defend people from other places in the world from essentially Gestapo tactics. These guys walk around in masks. They don't identify themselves. They're essentially kidnapping people, and there's no consequence for them, which it just leads into this other idea of how are we going to deal with this? Like, who's going to stand up to this? And it's horrible to say, but the only people standing up to anything anymore are comedians. Like, Stephen Colbert was standing up to the Trump administration and calling it out for the evil things it does. And what's the result of that? He's going to be off the air next week because CBS has decided to just acquiesce to what the Trump administration wants. CBS News is going to have a bias monitor in its newsroom, which is a censor. It's like a government censor is going to be there. And we should be appalled by this, but we don't seem to be. And I don't think people really understand what a dangerous situation we're facing right now is. There's this vicious move to remove rights from people, to kidnap people. I worry about myself because it's like that poem, they went for the communists, then they went for the socialists, then they went for the labor unions, and then eventually they went for me, but there was no one to save me. So that's where we're going, or that's the direction we're going in. And when you think about comedians actually making a difference in the world these days, you look at Zelensky in Ukraine. He was a comedian. He had a comedy show on about being president of Ukraine because he was sticking it to the oligarchs and the evil leaders of the time, and the people responded by putting him in office. But now he's a world leader, and he's fighting the Russians, which, they invaded his country, but our president has decided that he's siding with the Russians, which, makes you think, well, what do the Russians have on him with all the bad things that are going on?
Back to the comedians.
Yeah, let's go back to the comedians.
Yeah.
And one thing, the great comedic move of last week was the South Park episode.
Yeah.
Which was it not only went after the Trump administration, it went after CBS and Paramount for being, like lapdogs.
Just after they inked a $1.5 billion deal.
Yeah, and they just went totally nuclear on not only the Trump administration, they went nuclear on Paramount and CBS. They went nuclear on this move to get more Christianity in the schools. It's going to offend people, but one of the characters in this episode is Jesus.
And Jesus is being sued if he doesn't go into the schools in South Park.
Right. It's just crazy stuff. But the really impressive thing about it, I don't know if it's impressive, but it shows also what the show did show was the dangers of AI and how you can create things that look real and no one would know the difference. Because if you remember a couple of weeks ago, the Trump administration posted this video of Obama being arrested while in the White House with Trump, because Trump's now on this, one of the things he's doing is going for his greatest hits. That's, he can't get out of the Epstein file issue, which is, we all know he's been in the Epstein files. We all know that he did bad things. We all know he's a rapist. He's been convicted of it. He's been convicted of other crimes. He's a fraud. He's the kind of guy who pretends to be this savvy billionaire, but he couldn't keep a casino afloat, which is this is a money machine. How can you lose money at a casino?
The house always wins.
Yeah, but he just goes and he creates this video of Obama getting arrested, and he thinks it's funny. But when South Park creates a video of him doing the Jesus's walk through the desert naked, it's like, oh, this is out of line. This is out of control. So I look. I'm enjoying what comedians are doing. I think that's the only thing that's going to save us these days, and it seems to be the only thing that's going to save the world when comedians are being elected to public office. So who knows? Maybe Stephen Colbert will run for office
if we have free and fair elections in 26.
Yeah, but the other thing too was we did have a comedian in office, Al Franken. And
I met him. He was a great guy.
Yeah, but he got ousted because of, it was the politically correct thing to do. However, Republicans don't do anything that's politically correct.
No.
So if a Republican
Democrats
had done,
threw him under the bus.
Yeah, if a Republican had done the same thing that Al Franken had done, that Republican would still be in office
Well,
today.
they are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Like look at one of the members of the House was a coach at Ohio State when there was a scandal where the wrestling team was being sexually assaulted, and he's in the House. So. There's this idea that Republicans can get away with anything, and they can get away with stuff that approaches the level of Nazi shit, and the major media doesn't really respond to it. They just present the both sides issues. Whereas when Democrats do something, it's the end of the world. And
we have such a vacuum in leadership right now. I mean,
Right.
there are so many opportunities for the Democrats to just crush the Republicans on all of these things that are harming ordinary Americans.
And I think ordinary Americans are looking at it now, and I do see a lot of videos on YouTube where these former Trump supporters are now saying, "Well, looks like I made a mistake, and I'm sorry I voted for him." But the thing that I think they're sorry for isn't that he's doing bad things; it's that he's doing bad things to them. And they were totally happy with the, taking people off the streets, taking innocent people off the streets, putting them in concentration camps in a swamp in Florida, concentration camps that are owned by businesses and whose investors include a lot of Republican legislators. But it just keeps happening where there's this lack of character. And
another thing about money that I want to mention as a Jewish woman is increasingly there are these crackdowns against protesters of what Israel's doing in Gaza. And apparently, some of the right-wing Jewish people that are in charge of all this that's happening to silence this dissent on college campuses, they all have GoFundMes, and they're all raising a ton of money on this. So follow the money, people. It's so corrupt.
Well, the money is coming from a lot of it's coming from South Africans. The immigrants who have done the most damage to this country are South African billionaires. There's Peter Thiel, there's Elon Musk, there are others out there. They were raised in a country that's official policy was that people of color were inferior and didn't deserve protections and deserved to be treated badly. And so they come to America, to the United States, and they make $1 billion and they decide they want to impose apartheid on America, just like it was in the good old days for them. This is, it's like living, right now for a lot of people, it's like living before the Civil Rights era, in the 40s, in the 30s, where, the laws were specifically designed to benefit white people. This goes back to Chautauqua and to San Francisco, where there are all these covenants that moved out minorities. And, in San Francisco, since I lived there for 3 years, they put Japanese people in concentration camps.
Right.
They called them, I don't know what they called them, relocation facilities or whatever. But they were concentration camps. They took away their property. They moved families just instantly in a minute, and as a result, the minority population of San Francisco is minuscule. It used to be in the 70s, it was 15%. Today it's less than 5%. And But they don't see anything wrong with that. And they're still doing more in that area where the tech bros are building up neighborhoods where I've talked about this before on this podcast, but they have these designs for these new neighborhoods. They're like enclaves within the city. And, it's supposed to be like, oh, we're going to be all together, we're going to be happy, we're going to be working, we're going to be shared interest. And you look at the brochures, and their illustrations of what the place looks like includes no minorities.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, I think Trump may not even be around by the 26th election, if there is a 26th election. I think, the time that we're spending on Trump and even J.D. Vance, we've got to keep our eyes on the three people that are basically executing Project 2025, right? Which is Peter Thiel, Vogt, and Stephen Miller. Isn't that right?
Yep.
So how do we get to them?
Well, you have to get rid of the Trump administration, and the way to do that is to elect Democrats in the next election. People keep talking about the need for a third party. The reality of the United States is that third parties will not succeed here. So it ends up that if you're going to vote a third party, that means you're voting for a Republican. Because
what about Musk's third party?
It's a joke.
Yeah.
Well, he has an advantage in that he's got more money than God, and he thinks he's God, so what the hell. But he can put a lot of money in, he can throw things off. The important thing is to not send money to the Republicans. If you want to change the legislature, if you want to change the presidency, you have to focus on it's a two-party system. It's been this way for since the beginning of the 20th century, essentially. Back in the pre-Civil War days and after the Revolution, there were multiple political parties. There were the Whigs, there were the Democratic Republicans. They had there was the Know Nothing Party, which was a bunch of racist anyway, because they did horrible things in Louisville. And they were aiming their racism at other whites, but they were like Italians and Irish, because there's this ethnic purity that has pervaded this country forever, and eventually, like, certain ethnic groups begin to become white adjacent, and then they are white. Which goes to this recent election, where if you look at the Cubans in Miami, they were white adjacent, and they thought that they were white. But then you go down, and now a lot of them are being sent off to Alligator Auschwitz.
And Louisville has one of the largest Cuban communities in the country after Miami.
Yeah, and Louisville has been, very responsive to offering people sanctuary, which goes back to the sanctuary city issue. This is a move that actually takes away from the character of this city, and the mayor has allowed it. It is his fault. So, maybe it's time to vote these guys out too as well. You've talked about the weakness of the Democratic leadership. Maybe it's time to vote them out, because the Republicans have shown what they want, and they do want what Nazis want. There was that, I forget the commentator's name, but it was an Indian American commentator who did this thing on Jubilee, where he did this roundtable with ultra-right white Republicans. And in the course of this discussion, he got one guy to admit that he was a fascist, that the guy was a fascist, and he was proud of it, and the people around him were applauding it. Now, the consequence of that, of course, was that the guy who admitted being a fascist was fired from his job, but he goes and forms a GoFundMe page, and he's got just money coming in. There's this welfare for Republicans. That's their system. They talk about welfare and how minorities are taking advantage of it, but there's Republican welfare, and it's from the billionaires and the oligarchs who are funding this evil that's going on, not because they care about humanity. It's because they don't have enough money. They have more money than anybody, anywhere. but they don't have enough. It's like if Elon Musk has $300 billion, if Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos have more than $200 billion, and there are tons of billionaires in this country. And I keep saying this, if they gave away 99% of their wealth, they would still be richer than everybody else in the country. And all that money that they're hoarding could do so much to, deal with health care, deal with poverty.
Housing,
yeah. It's just, it doesn't, it's the tax system in this country, which has just been reinforced by this bullshit bill. It's designed to keep the rich even richer and to take away money from the poor. And I think that's where the realization for a lot of Trump voters has come, where they thought that all the attacks would be on people who weren't them. And they failed to realize that the oligarchs have created a whole new category of people to oppress, and it's people without money. That's their form of racism. If you don't have the big bucks, you don't deserve anything. And it just keeps happening in this country, and we have to change our voting patterns. We have to convince people that, like in Eastern Kentucky or Western Kentucky, why are you voting for congressmen who are millionaires and who are voting against your interest? The votes that the Kentucky Republicans have made this year, with the exception of Tom Massey, who's problematic, but he's actually right in these instances where he's saying where they're just taking money from these constituents, from people who rely on Medicare, rely on food stamps, which is SNAP benefits, rely on Social Security, Medicaid. Yeah, they want to go after Medicare and Medicaid. It's something that Republicans have wanted to destroy ever since the days of Franklin Roosevelt. But
all right, well, it's my birthday today.
Oh, yes, happy birthday.
Thank you. So, one of the things that we talked about before we started the podcast was how it's so hard not to be mad.
Yes.
All the time. I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about how the algorithm works to keep us mad, but then I want to get a little bit happier, a little bit lighter.
We will be lighter, but this is just a quick reference.
Okay.
The algorithm is designed to keep you clicking, and if you're an angry person, it will design things for you to stay angry. And one of the things I'm trying to get off of social media, like Facebook, there are just these things that I realized after a while is that I'm not reading this because I'm interested. I'm reading this because it's making me mad. And that's how the Republicans, they have their own social media with Truth Social and with X that Elon Musk owns. And it's just what this is doing is tearing the country apart, but it's making rich people even richer because those are the people who have invested in the algorithm. So Google owns YouTube, Facebook. Facebook has all kinds of problems, and Facebook was used to actually steal an election in the past. They looked at what the algorithm was giving, and they were feeding this hostile information to their users. So I just think it's time to look at what your social media habits are, and from now on, I think I'm just going to focus on things that make me laugh, which brings us to our next discussion, and that's on what makes you laugh. What's entertaining to you?
Well, we watched a really fun movie. What is it called? K-pop Demon Hunters?
Yes. Yeah.
Talk about it, Jesse.
Oh, K-pop Demon Hunters is from Sony Studios. It's K-pop, of course, Korean pop idols. It's essentially it's a girl band against a boy band. The girl band are demon hunters. The boy band are demons.
Wait. Do we want to do any spoilers? Maybe not.
There may be one. There is, if it's a girl-boy situation, there's always the love interest that sort of develops in the course of any movie or any program. But it's really well done, and one of the things about it is the animation style is the same style as it was in the Spider-Man, Miles Morales Spider-Man movies, the Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse. So the artwork is really excellent.
The music is fun.
The music is fun, but I've been watching a lot of Asian entertainment as well. There's this other show called My Demon Girlfriend, and it's just this nerdy guy who can't get a girlfriend. I think it's a Korean sitcom, and so he conjures up this demon girlfriend who's doing all kinds of horrible things, and he's trying to convince her to not be a demon. But it's totally stupid, but that's sort of what you're seeing in Asian animation and Asian entertainment these days.
Well, I really loved that the three protagonists are women, and they're badass, and their friendship is definitely important, and it shows you the power of friendship. The other thing I really liked about it is that the demon really is about shame, is about an internal thing, and shame and things that make you feel less than. And I just thought the exploration of that was so good and unusual. Mm-hmm. The other thing I thought was fun is that the romance is so much like those K-dramas, right?
Yeah.
Like, even though it's animated, the way that the characters just kind of stand there looking up at afar or whatever,
right.
And they hold that moment for a long time,
mm-hmm.
just the way that they do in the K-dramas.
Yeah.
I thought it was really entertaining.
Yeah, there was another K-drama I was watching. It was about a chef, and I forget the name of it. I'll find it for the next episode, or I'll put it in our notes. But there's a young woman who goes to a tasting, and she notices something in the food and points it out. And the chef in this series is losing his sense of taste, but he's so amazed when this woman recognizes what he's done just by tasting the food that he brings her on as his apprentice. And of course, they fall in love. But there's this male-female hostility that goes through these series as well, where the man is so stoic and the woman is just pissed off that the guy is such a hard ass. But they fall in love, and it's just typical of Asian drama, it seems. I've been watching a lot of Asian drama, so because it's what's there to watch in the United States, which brings us to another issue here, and that's things I've been watching. I'm noticing there are a lot of TV shows involving very women with mental difficulties, like autism.
Differences. Mental differences,
differences.
Neurodivergence. We all are on some sort of spectrum, right?
Right.
But he's talking about like these female protagonists who can't just be like a cleaning lady, right? They've got to be a genius to be the protagonist, right? And then, of course, they're also neurodivergent in some way or on the spectrum in some way.
Right, and the cleaning lady example, it's a TV show that's on ABC. It's called High Potential. And I'm wondering if the woman who's the actor is like the sister, her last name is Olsen, so I'm wondering if she's related to Mary-Kate.
I went down the rabbit hole. I don't know that she is, but if anybody watched Hacks, she is the daughter of Jean Smart's character on Hacks.
Huh.
She's very beautiful. She's very very thin,
mm-hmm.
very sexy.
Right.
And not just your average cleaning lady.
Right. And the point of the show is that, okay, we have this genius who can solve crimes, but is not just, it just takes, everybody looks at her the wrong way, and underappreciates.
Especially the head cop guy.
Who's always this gruffy guy,
Although the lieutenant is a black female.
Yeah. And
she trusts her.
Right, yeah. But that's the women sticking together, maybe, but she offers perspectives, and it's like, in the old days when you were watching things like Monk, or Columbo, where you have these very quirky detectives who just see things that others don't see. And there's this string of television shows now that are doing the same kind of thing, because in addition to High Potential, which I should point out, it started in France. It was a French series called High Potential Intellect, and in French, that was in French. I did the English translation, but it turns out that the High Potential series that's on in the U.S. now is on in 4 other countries with different, one's in Greece, one's in Hungary, one's in the Czech Republic, and one's in Slovakia. So that's 4. Yeah, well, then it's 6, because it's now in the U.S. and it started in France. But it's the same story. It's the same show, just with different actresses in a different language. And there's another show like that, and it's called Patience. And it's about a neurodivergent woman who struggles in life, but she can spot things in a crime scene that the detectives who have been working in these jobs forever just don't seem to get.
And is that Great Britain?
That's out of Great Britain, yeah. And Patience is the name of the person who is neurodivergent. So I was watching that. I thought it was really interesting. It's still on. It's on PBS on Sunday night. And one day I was going through Amazon Prime, and there was this show called Astrid, which was about a neurodivergent woman who works with the police department and helps them solve crime, but she has difficulty in interacting with people.
Or she interacts with people differently.
Yes, but it's the same show. And the first episode I saw of Astrid was exactly the same episode of Patience, just in a different language with different actors and different actresses. So, there's this lack of originality in coming up with things, where people are just taking ideas from other countries and using them to appeal to an American audience, which brings us back to the idea of the importance of immigrants in this country, where we're accepting their entertainment, but we're taking
their labor,
their labor, their entertainment, their ideas, and
their taxes,
making money from them, but we don't want to give them the rights that they deserve. So I don't know. It's just it's interesting to see how this is developing. But anyway, these are some of the things I'm watching, and there are things you're watching too. I would be interested in just another change of pace. I would be kind of interested in seeing the Superman movie, because I'm a big Superman fan, and Superman is an immigrant. He came from another planet. He entered the country illegally.
He's an illegal alien.
Right. He has no birthright citizenship, and
he's Superman.
But he's also improving the lives of everyone around him. And if you go into the history of Superman, it was started in the 1930s by a couple of Jewish guys who were responding to the rise of the Nazis. Yeah. And Superman was anti-fascist.
Right.
And he was for unions. And he protected the little guy, and he wanted people treated equally, which, in today's America is attacked by the right. It's kind of interesting. And so now, if you look at the media on the right, they're saying, oh, Superman's woke. But Superman has always been woke. It's just that they've been trying to make him the symbol of white purity, when in essence he's a foreigner who's come to America, has improved the lives of people in America, has upheld our values and upheld our systems, and now he's being persecuted.
And going back to woke, one of the funniest bits of the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh yes, this is South Park.
Was that Cartman? Cartman's an asshole, right? And he dons this T-shirt, "Woke is dead," and he's lamenting the fact that he's not special anymore, right?
Right.
And so he tries to commit suicide with Butters. But we find out that Butters' parents have an EV.
Yeah.
And so the hose, to asphyxiate them doesn't work, and they're just sitting in the car, not dying. But I'm telling you, almost every second, look at the art hanging on the walls when you see Trump. Yeah. Trump is Saddam Hussein, with Satan. It's just wild what they've done.
Oh.
And I think it's close to time to ending too, but it's my birthday today, and what I did on socials today was ask people to take one action today. You don't have to report back, although you can if you want to. Just one action to fight fascism today, or to speak up about the genocide in Gaza, or just speak your conscience. Use the 5 Calls app, make a call, email, write a letter, show up at a protest. Donate to a Latinx organization that's really fighting on behalf of our Latinx neighbors. Whatever it is, take a good action today. That'll be really great.
And we will post the letter that you have to our website. And
I'll post the picture of the hardworking Latinx men on the roof in 100-degree weather with heat index and almost 100% humidity. I'm going to post that photo of them too.
Yeah, and again, these are people who are in this country doing important work, making our lives better, and our response to them has been go away. This is just, I agree with you all the way on this. So let's wrap it up. I think this was a good conversation today.
Thanks, Jesse.
Okay.
Lots to talk about. See you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so long, everybody. Our closing music is by John Chamberlain.